London fog lay thick upon the city that chill autumn evening in 1892. At Sherlock Whisper, Holmes sat idle, violin silent, craving challenge after weeks of trivial matters. Then came the urgent knock, sharp, desperate, upon our door. Sir Reginald Hargrove, wealthy industrialist of Belgrave Square, lay dead in his locked study, throat cut, a bloody letter opener beside him. The governess, Miss Eleanor Voss, was found standing over the body, hands stained crimson, screaming that she had discovered him thus. Scotland Yard saw a simple explanation: jealousy over a dismissed suitor, or perhaps inheritance intrigue. The governess had recently been promised a legacy by Lady Hargrove before her own death months prior. But Holmes saw a link: the peculiar pattern of blood drops upon the Persian carpet, unbroken by any footprint save the lady's own small boots. One link in a chain that would bind a killer and free the innocent. The game is afoot. Chapter 1. The first link. I set down these events as they occurred in the autumn of 1892, when the fogs of London seemed thicker than usual, as if the city itself conspired to hide its secrets. Coal smoke from countless chimneys blended with the damp brought rising from the Thames, and the air carried a bitter taste of soot with every breath outside our rooms at 221B Baker Street. Holmes had grown restless these past days, pacing before the crackling coal fire, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar light as he drew thoughtfully upon his pipe, the Persian slipper already brimming with shag tobacco. Mrs. Hudson had just carried up our evening tea, hot, steaming, strong enough to cut through the chill, when a sharp, urgent knock echoed up the 17 steps. The door flew open without waiting for invitation. Inspector Gregson of Scotland Yard entered, his ulster dripping fog, face pale beneath his hat. A young constable trailed him, helmet tucked under arm, staring wide-eyed at the chemical bottles cluttering the deal table and the Stradivarius violin resting on the mantel. "M.R. Holmes," Gregson said bluntly. "A bad business in Belgrave Square. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the industrialist, found dead in his locked study, throat cut clean. The governess, Miss Eleanor Voss, stood over him with blood on her hands and dress. Door bolted from inside. Key in the lock, windows latched. No other way in or out. Lestrade's already convinced it's her. Claims motive tied to a promised legacy from the late Lady Hargrove." Holmes steepled his fingers under his chin. "Every detail, Gregson." "Spare nothing." The inspector described the scene. The study overlooked the square, heavy oak door bolted, no force marks. Sir Reginald sat slumped at his desk in evening clothes, throat slashed once, deeply. Blood had pooled on the blotter and spattered the Persian carpet. Miss Voss, 28, governess to the 2 Hargrove children for 3 years, had brought tea at 8:30, discovered the body, screamed, and been found moments later by the butler. She swore she touched only the body to feel for pulse. Yet arterial spray stained her cuffs, and a smear marked her cheek. The letter opener lay on the floor, Gregson added, her prints on the hilt. She admits picking it up in shock. Holmes rose at once. "We go immediately. Watson, your coat. The fog turns bitter tonight. Our hansom rattled through the mist, wheels grinding wet cobblestones, horse's breath steaming in the cold. I tasted coal smoke on every inhale as Belgrave Square appeared, grand houses silent under gaslight halos. The Hargrove residence stood 4 stories tall, Portland stone facade, only the study window faintly lit. Inside, the hall smelled of carbolic soap and the metallic bite of fresh blood. The butler, Mr. Poole, 60, hands trembling, guided us upstairs. Lestrade waited in the study, mustache twitching. "Holmes," he greeted grudgingly. "Here to complicate a straightforward case?" Holmes ignored the remark. He crouched beside the body. Sir Reginald, 50, robust, silver-haired, had fallen forward onto his blotter. The wound gaped, edges clean. Blood dripped in distinct patterns across the carpet. Holmes drew his lens, studying first the throat, then the floor. "The first link, Watson," he murmured. "These 3 blood drops, each 7 inches apart, forming a shallow arc toward the window. No connecting smear to where Miss Voss stood before the desk." I knelt. The thick Persian carpet held the dark spatters clearly. Blade withdrawal spatter? Exactly. But the arc curves left, from the killer's position behind and to the right of the chair. Miss Voss entered from the door opposite. She could not produce this pattern unless she struck the blow and then retreated 7 paces backward, without treading in the pooling blood. Lestrade snorted. She could have flung the letter opener. Holmes moved to the window, latches secure, sill unmarked. He knelt again, tracing the pile. Second link. A faint boot heel print here. Size 8. Narrow tread. Traces of reddish clay mixed with coal dust. Miss Voss wears ladies' boots, size 5. No clay on hers. I leaned close. The clay gave off a faint coal dust smell. From a specific district? Patience, Holmes replied. He turned to the desk, papers disordered, one sheet half-charred in the grate where embers still glowed warm. He lifted the fragment, a corner bearing a bank crest. Third link. He declared, eyes alight. This paper carries strong, carbolic scent, medicinal, sharp. Sir Reginald required no such treatment, but Miss Voss administers carbolic gargle daily to young Master Thomas for his cough. The scent clings to her hands, yet she insists she never touched the desk. Brixton shifted uneasily. All circumstantial. Links, Inspector, Holmes said. The blood arc rules out her position. The boot print rules out her size. The carbolic places her scent on a document she denies handling. Scotland Yard sees murderous. I see an innocent woman framed. We checked further. The key showed normal wear, bolts untampered. The small safe stood open, papers disturbed, a fresh scratch on the dial suggesting gentle force. Nothing obviously stolen. Back at Baker Street, the fire crackled against the fog pressing at the windows. Holmes paced, pipe in hand. Remember the red-headed league, Watson? A single boot stained with unique suburban clay, combined with the absence of London soot. Shattered and ironclad alibi of club attendants. Earth records every footfall. Here the carpet records blood arcs and foreign clay. Miss Voss left neither. I poured brandy, sweet after the night's bitterness. Who then? The first link forged, Watson. The chain begins. The distant fog horns moaned on the Thames. What chain would you build from these observations, dear reader? Did you spot the links before Holmes? Chapter 2. Forging Connections. The following morning the fog had thinned to a gray veil, but the air still tasted of coal smoke and wet newspaper as the boy below our windows cried the headlines. Holmes had barely slept. I had heard him plucking absently at the Stradivarius until the small hours, the notes sharp against the crackling fire. Mrs. Hudson brought breakfast, hot tea, toast with marmalade, the bitter coffee Holmes preferred when his mind raced. Over the table he reached for the Persian slipper and filled his pipe. 4 calls today, Watson, he said, smoke curling upward. Belgrave Square once more, Miss Voss's lodgings in Pimlico, the bank whose crest was on that charred paper, and the nursery, for the carbolic may yet speak louder. We began at the Hargrove house. The square lay quiet, gas lamps still burning weakly in the daylight. Inside, the air carried the faint smell of carbolic soap mixed with the heavy scent of morning flowers. Mr. Poole, the butler, received us in the morning room. His hands, rough and veined, shook slightly as he poured tea from a silver pot. Sir Reginald was strict but just, Poole said in a low voice. After Lady Hargrove passed, he relied on Miss Voss for the children. She taught them French, read to them by the nursery fire every evening. I cannot believe she would harm him. Holmes drew thoughtfully on his pipe. Enemies, Poole? Business rivals? Personal grudges? The butler hesitated, glancing toward the closed door. Amar. Charles Wentworth, his partner at the Hargrove Iron Foundry in Whitechapel. They argued over patents last month, loudly. And there was young Mr. Arthur Langley, who once courted Miss Voss. Sir Reginald forbade the match, called him unsuitable. Langley left angry. We climbed to the nursery. The room smelled strongly of carbolic and warm milk. Soft textures everywhere, velvet curtains, worn leather rocking horse, wool rugs underfoot. Young Master Thomas, 8 years old, sat pale on the floor with his sister Beatrice, 6, who clutched a china doll. Both Children looked up with wide, frightened eyes. Holmes knelt beside the boy. "Your medicine bottle, Thomas. The carbolic gargle. Did Miss Voss ever go near your father's study with it on her hands?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "Only books and lessons. She always smelled like soap. Father said it kept sickness away." Beatrice whispered, "She cried last night. Said they think she did it. But she didn't." Next we took a hansom to Pimlico. The streets grew narrower, cobbles slick with yesterday's rain. Miss Voss's room sat above a milliner's shop, reached by a narrow stair smelling of damp leather and old felt. Her landlady, Mrs. Grimshaw, a thin woman with a sour face, unlocked the door grudgingly. "Quiet tenant," she muttered. "Always paid on time. But last month a gentleman called twice. Tall, dark coat, never gave his name. Left angry once." The room was small and neat. A single trunk held modest dresses of gray and black. On the washstand stood a brown bottle of carbolic solution, half empty. Holmes lifted it, sniffed. "She carried this daily for the boy's throat," he murmured. Yet the scent on that half-burned bank draft was identical, sharp, medicinal. A connection forming. I touched the rough wool of her shawl hanging behind the door. "She denies entering the study beyond discovering the body." "Precisely, Watson. Yet her scent is there." Our third stop was the city, Threadneedle Street. The bank smelled of ink, polished mahogany, and the faint metallic tang of coin. Mr. Hargreaves, the manager, smooth-voiced, immaculately dressed, met us in a private office. "Sir Reginald withdrew £5,000 in cash yesterday afternoon," he explained, producing a ledger. "He mentioned an investment. The burned paper you describe was part of our draft receipt. No record of any deposit elsewhere." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Large sum. No explanation given?" "None." He seemed preoccupied. Rain began as we left, drumming on the handsome roof during our return to Baker Street. The fire welcomed us with warmth against the damp chill. Holmes paced rapidly before it, pipe smoke mingling with the coal scent. "Links multiply, Watson," he said. "Wentworth, motive and disputed patents, access to the foundry's reddish clay. Langley, jealousy over Miss Voss. Perhaps resentment toward Sir Reginald. £5,000 withdrawn, blackmail. Debt?" Yet the room was locked from inside. All suspects were outside. Miss Voss was inside, yet the blood arc, the boot print, the carbolic contradict her guilt. I sipped brandy, sweet on the tongue after the day's cold bitterness. Red herrings, then? Likely. But observe how the pieces begin to join. The chain takes shape. Links forging one to the next. The rain tapped insistently at the window. Holmes paused, steepled his fingers. "What chain would you build from these 4 visits, dear reader? The scent on the paper, the clay in the print, the sudden cash. Did you connect them before, Holmes?" Watson saw only fragments at first. "How many links did you spot?" The fire crackled softly. Outside, a distant foghorn moaned on the Thames. The links were forging. The chain takes shape. Chapter 3. The chain grows. 2 days after the murder, the fog returned thicker than before, wrapping Belgrave Square in a damp shroud that carried the heavy smell of Thames mud and coal smoke. I noted in my journal how the gas lights along the railings burned with sickly yellow halos, their light barely piercing the gloom. Holmes had spent the previous evening examining scraps of evidence under his lens, muttering about incomplete links, until the fire died low. This morning, he announced, we would return to the scene. "The study holds more," he said, drawing on his pipe as we descended the 17 steps. The first examination was hasty. Now we returned with fresh eyes. Our hansom splashed through puddles, wheels rumbling over uneven cobbles, the horse snorting clouds of steam into the cold air. Inside the Hargrove residence, the hall felt colder than before. The scent of carbolic lingered faintly, now mixed with a musty odor of closed rooms and wilting flowers in vases. Mr. Poole met us at the door, his face more drawn, the rough tweed of his coat damp from an earlier errand. "Inspector Lestrade has been and gone again," Poole said quietly. He took Miss Voss's statement once more. "She remains in custody." Holmes nodded without comment. We climbed directly to the study. The room had been left almost untouched since our last visit. Only the body removed, the bloodstains darkened on the blotter and carpet. The fire had not been lit since the night of the crime, leaving the air chilly and stale. Holmes closed the door behind us and stood still for a long moment, eyes half closed, breathing in the faint metallic tang that still hung in the space. He began at the carpet once more. Kneeling, he traced the arc of blood drops with a gloved finger. The pattern remains clear, 3 spatters, 7 inches apart, curving left toward the window. No footprint crosses the pool itself. Yet here, he pointed to a spot near the desk leg, a single small smear barely visible unless one knows to look. Not from a boot sole. From fabric. Wool, perhaps. Coarse. I crouched beside him. The mark was faint, a dull reddish streak no wider than a thumb. The killer's cuff as he leaned over? Or her? Holmes corrected, but observed the direction. It drags toward the bookcase on the right wall, not toward the door where Miss Voss entered. He rose and crossed to the tall oak bookcase that filled most of one wall. Leather-bound volumes stood in neat rows, works on engineering, metallurgy, patent law. Holmes ran his fingers along the shelves, then paused at the third from the bottom. Dust, he murmured. Disturbed here. A thin line, recently white but not perfectly. And this volume. He pulled out a thick tome on foundry techniques. Behind it, the wood panel showed a hairline crack. Holmes pressed gently. A soft click sounded. The section of bookcase swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow passage barely wide enough for a man. Dust motes danced in the beam of light from the study window. The passage smelled strongly of old plaster, coal dust, and that same reddish clay we had noted in the boot print. The fourth link, Watson, Holmes said, eyes gleaming with that peculiar light. A concealed door, known perhaps only to the household staff or to one who had long service here. He stepped inside cautiously. The passage ran parallel to the wall for 10 feet before turning sharply toward what must be the interior of the house. On the floor lay a single scrap of coarse wool, dark gray, matching the butler's livery. Holmes lifted it with tweezers. Wool from a servant's coat. And see, the reddish clay ground into the fibers. The same clay as in the boot print. We returned to the study. Holmes knelt again beside the safe. The fresh scratch on the dial now appeared in a new light. Gentle force applied with a thin tool, perhaps a penknife. Not amateurish violence, but careful probing. Someone who knew the combination was changed recently. He straightened. Now the chain grows stronger. Let us forge the major connection. He paced slowly before the empty fireplace, steepled fingers under his chin. The link. The concealed passage behind the bookcase, unknown to Scotland Yard, marked by disturbed dust and a fragment of servant's wool bearing the exact reddish clay found in the mysterious boot print. The forge. This passage allows entry and exit without disturbing the locked door or windows. The killer could strike, leave by the hidden way, and lock the study from outside using a duplicate key or string device, though I suspect a simpler explanation. The door was never truly locked until after the body was discovered. He paused, drawing on his pipe thoughtfully. Recall the Milverton case, Watson. A blackmailer's house riddled with secret passages known only to longtime servants. In that affair, a single displaced floorboard and a trace of lamp black on a housemaid's apron betrayed the route used by the murderer, who was, in truth, the very woman thought most innocent. The house itself became witness. Its hidden ways remembered the intruder's tread. Here the bookcase remembers the same. The clay matches the foundry district where patents are disputed. Wentworth? Possibly. But the wool points closer to home. I felt a chill despite the warming room. Fool! Too soon to bind that name. But the chain tightens. Holmes examined the charred paper fragment once more. The carbolic scent on this bank draft, still unexplained by Miss Voss's denial. Yet if the killer carried the document through the passage after rifling the safe, and Miss Voss's bottle stood open in the nursery corridor nearby, a momentary contact might transfer the odor. A planted link meant to incriminate her. We spent another half-hour measuring distances, noting angles, sketching the passage's probable route. Holmes whistled softly between his teeth, a rare sign of satisfaction. Outside, Big Ben told the hour, muffled by fog. Rain began again, tapping like impatient fingers on the window panes. Back at Baker Street that evening, the fire burned bright against the bitter cold. Holmes sat with legs stretched, pipe in hand, staring into the flames. The chain grows stronger, Watson. 4 links now. Blood arc, foreign boot print, carbolic transfer, hidden passage. Logic binds them one to the next. I tasted the sweet burn of brandy on my tongue. And the next link? Soon. Very soon. The foghorns moaned distantly. Before Holmes explains further, what does this new evidence chain tell you, dear reader? The concealed door was the crucial link. Did you see it waiting behind the books? Holmes saw 4 links clearly. How many did you spot? The chain grows stronger. Logic binds. Chapter 4. Testing the links. The rain had eased by the 4th day, but the fog clung stubbornly to London's streets, carrying the sharp bite of coal smoke and the distant, briny stink of the Thames. At 221B, the fire burned steadily, warming the room against the damp chill that seeped through the window frames. Holmes had risen early, already surrounded by maps of Belgrave Square and Whitechapel, chemical stains on his fingers from overnight experiments on the wool fragment and clay sample. Over bitter black coffee, he outlined the day's work. Today we test the chain, Watson, he said, pacing before the hearth. Every link must hold or break. We visit 5 places in rapid succession. Weak theories will shatter. The true ones will standard. Our first call was to the Hargrove Iron Foundry in Whitechapel. The hansom rattled through narrow streets where the air grew thick with the acrid smell of molten metal and coal dust. The foundry yard was a chaos of clanging hammers, hissing steam, and red glowing furnaces. Mr. Charles Wentworth, Sir Reginald's partner, met us in a small office smelling of hot oil and burnt paper. He was a broad man in his late 40s, sleeves rolled, forearms smudged with reddish clay from the molding pits. Terrible business, Wentworth said gruffly, wiping hands on a rag. Reginald and I disagreed on the new valve patent, yes. Heated words. But murder? Absurd. Holmes produced the clay sample from the boot print. This reddish earth, your molding pits use precisely this mixture. Coal dust blended in. Does it leave your premises often? Wentworth frowned. Only on boots and barrows. Never far. Why? Holmes merely nodded. You were at your club the night of the murder? Until 10. Dozen saw me. We left without pressing further. Holmes murmured as we climbed back into the cab. His alibi holds for now, but the clay is common to the foundry. A possible link, yet not exclusive. Second stop. The rooms of Mr. Arthur Langley in Soho. The building smelled of cheap tobacco and damp plaster. Stairs creaked underfoot. Langley, 30, handsome but hollow-eyed, received us in a cluttered sitting room. Rough tweed jacket, worn leather chair, cold coffee on the table. I loved Eleanor, he said bitterly. Sir Reginald dismissed me like a servant, said I had no prospects. I never forgave him, but kill him? No. Holmes asked, your movements that evening? At a music hall until 11. Ticket stub and my coat if you wish. The stub matched the date and time. Holmes pocketed it without comment. Outside, he said, jealousy burns hot, Watson, but his boots bear ordinary London mud. No clay. A weak link snapped. Third, Scotland Yard, where Miss Voss was held. The corridors smelled of carbolic and old stone. The interview room was cold, lit by a single gas jet. She sat pale but composed, hands folded. I swear I touched only his body, she repeated. The letter opener, I picked it up in horror. The papers, I never saw them. Holmes leaned forward. The carbolic on the bank draft. Explain it. I prepared Thomas's gargle every morning in the nursery corridor. If someone took a paper past the open bottle, her voice faltered. But who? Holmes nodded. Your boots? Size 5. No clay. I never left the house that day. Her story held firm. Holmes' eyes gleamed. Strong link. She remains inside the chain of innocence. Fourth, back to Belgrave Square, this time the servants' hall. We spoke to the cook, the housemaid, the footman. Each confirmed Poole's long service 23 years. None knew of a hidden passage. The footman hesitated. Amar. Poole sometimes went to the study late at night. Said he checked the locks. Always alone. Holmes asked no more. As we left the servant's entrance, the cold cobblestones pressed through my boots. A servant's knowledge of the house, Holmes murmured. The wool fragment matches livery cloth. The link strengthens. Final test. The bank once more. Mr. Hargreaves met us nervously in the same mahogany office. Holmes placed the charred draft fragment before him. This receipt for £5,000. Sir Reginald withdrew the cash at 3 o'clock. Where did he go next? Hargreaves consulted notes. He took a hansom. I watched from the door. Headed east, toward the city, perhaps Whitechapel. Holmes steepled his fingers. Toward the foundry, or toward Homeville, a longer route. The cash never reached a deposit. Therefore, it was taken after death, or before by someone who knew his movements. We returned to Baker Street as dusk fell. The fire crackled warmly. Rain pattered against the panes. Holmes stood before the hearth, pipe in hand, reviewing aloud. The Wentworth link, clay matches, but alibi firm and no access to the study. Broken. Langley motive, but no clay, no passage knowledge. Broken. Miss Voss. Blood pattern excludes her. Boot size excludes her. Carbolic explained by proximity. Olds. Poole long service. Possible knowledge of hidden ways. Wool fragment matches livery, clay consistent with foundry errands he might run. Strengthens. The cash withdrawal, motive for theft. Perhaps embezzlement covered by murder. I poured brandy. Its sweet warmth cut the day's chill. So the chain discards 2 suspects. 3 weak links shattered. Holmes corrected. The true chain emerges, narrower, stronger, forged in harder metal. Outside, hansom wheels clattered past in the fog. Holmes turned, eyes alight. Tell me, dear reader, what did these tests reveal to you? Did you see which links would break before Holmes struck them? Watson doubted Poole at first. Did you spot the wool and the late-night checks as the turning points? How many weak theories did you discard today? The fire snapped softly. Weak links shattered. The true chain emerges. Chapter 5. The chain tightens. By the 5th day, the fog had lifted somewhat, but a persistent drizzle fell over London, turning the cobblestones slick and black under the gaslights. The air tasted of wet coal smoke and the faint, sour rot rising from the gutters. At 221B Baker Street, the fire roared against the damp chill. Holmes stood motionless by the window, watching hansoms splash past below, his pipe cold in his hand. He had said little since yesterday's tests, but this morning his eyes held that peculiar sharp light. The chain tightens, Watson, he announced suddenly. Tonight we confront the quarry. But first, one final link must be forged. We return to Belgrave Square at dusk. Poole will be alone in the house. The family has gone to relatives in Kent. I felt a stir of unease. You suspect the butler. I no longer suspect. I know, but proof demands action. Dress warmly. The chase may be swift. We took a hansom as twilight deepened, the wheels grinding wetly over the stones. Big Ben tolled 7, heavy and muffled. The Hargrave residence stood dark save for a single light in the lower hall. Poole answered our knock himself, coat already on as if preparing to leave. Gentlemen, he said, voice steady, but eyes wary. The family is away. May I assist? Holmes stepped inside without invitation. You may, Poole. By telling us precisely how you entered and left the study the night Sir Reginald died, without using the door. The butler's face remained impassive, but his hand tightened on the door latch. I do not understand, sir. Holmes moved past him toward the staircase. Come, Watson. The bookcase awaits. We climbed to the study. The room felt colder than before, the Persian carpet still bearing faint dark stains. Holmes crossed directly to the bookcase and pressed the hidden catch. The panel swung open with the same soft click, revealing the narrow passage. Dust stirred. The smell of old plaster and reddish clay rose strongly. Poole had followed silently. His face had gone gray. Holmes stepped into the passage, lantern in hand, borrowed from the hall table. This way leads to the back stairs, does it not? The servants' stair behind the pantry, a route you have used for 23 years. Unseen, unremarked. Poole said nothing. Holmes continued, voice calm but inexorable. The fifth link, Watson observed. He crouched and pointed to the passage floor. Fresh scuff marks, boots the same size as the print in the study. And here, he lifted a small brass key from a crack in the floorboards. The duplicate study key. Dropped in haste that night. The lock was never forced. It was opened from inside after the deed, then locked again from the passage side as the killer withdrew. I stared at the key, glinting dully in the lantern light. Then he... Precisely. Sir Reginald was already dead when Miss Voss entered. Poole struck from behind the chair, right-handed, hence the leftward blood arc. He rifled the safe, took the £5,000 withdrawn that afternoon, planted the charred draft near the body to carry Miss Voss's carbolic scent, then exited by this passage. He returned later, discovered the body with the household, ensuring Miss Voss was blamed. Poole's shoulders sagged. You cannot prove. Holmes turned sharply. I can and will. The wool fragment from your livery coat, caught on a nail in the passage. The clay on your boots, traced to the foundry where you sold Sir Reginald's stolen patent drawings months ago. Wentworth confirmed the clay today. He saw you there last week, offering old papers for cash. The motive? Embezzlement discovered. Sir Reginald planned to prosecute. You acted first. The butler's face twisted. For a moment he stood frozen. Then he bolted down the passage. The game changes, Holmes cried, lantern raised. After him, Watson. We plunged into the narrow way. The passage twisted, low and dusty. Rough bricks scraped my shoulders. Footsteps echoed ahead, rapid, panicked. We burst out behind the pantry into the servants' stair, dark and steep. Poole was already halfway down, coat flapping. I stumbled after Holmes, boots pounding wooden steps. Cold air rushed up from below. We reached the kitchen, empty, fire banked low. The back door stood open to the mews. Rain lashed in, soaking the stone flags. Outside, the alley gleamed wet under a single gas lamp. Poole sprinted toward the square, handsome shadows flickering past the end. Holmes ran with long, tireless strides. I followed, lungs burning. Stop, Poole, Holmes called. The chain binds you now. The butler glanced back once, face pale, desperate, then darted between two carriages into the square. A horse reared. A driver cursed. We lost him for a moment in the fog and rain. Holmes halted, breathing hard but eyes blazing. He heads for Victoria Station. Telegrams will wait there. We cut him off. We hailed a passing hansom, driver cursing the mud, and raced through the wet streets. Gaslights blurred. Rain drummed the roof. At Victoria, the crowd milled under the great roof, steam and coal smoke thick. Holmes scanned faces. There. Poole stood at the ticket window, soaked, clutching a small valise. The £5,000, no doubt. He turned, saw us, and bolted toward the platforms. Holmes sprinted forward. I followed. Porters shouted. Whistles blew. We closed the gap on the crowded platform. Poole reached the edge, train pulling out slowly, smoke billowing. He hesitated. Then Holmes seized his arm. No escape, Poole. The chain is complete. The butler sagged, valise dropping. Rain dripped from his hat. Defeat etched every line of his face. Back at Baker Street hours later, the fire burned warm against the night's chill. Holmes sat quietly, pipe relit, the duplicate key on the table between us. The breakthrough came in the passage, he said softly. One small key, one final link. No escape now. I tasted brandy sweet, steady. You saw it all along. Link by link, the chain tightens. No escape now. Outside, rain tapped the panes. A fog horn moaned far off. The concealed passage, the dropped key, the valise of stolen money. Did you forge that final connection before the chase began, dear reader? Holmes saw the duplicate key waiting in the dust. Did you? Before he explains, What did the scuff marks and the brass glint tell you? The chain tightens. No escape now. Chapter 6. Links to the past. The sixth morning dawned cold and clear for once. The fog vanished, leaving London's rooftops sharp against a pale sky. Yet the air still carried the familiar bite of coal smoke from waking chimneys, and the streets below rang with the clatter of handsome wheels on dry cobbles. At 221B Baker Street, the fire burned low but steady. Holmes sat in his armchair, legs stretched, the duplicate key and the small valise of recovered banknotes resting on the deal table like trophies. He had spent the night reviewing old police reports and telegrams from Whitechapel. Today the chain reaches backward, Watson, he said, drawing thoughtfully on his pipe. Poole's history will explain the motive fully. We visit 3 places. Scotland Yard records, the Hargrove foundry once more, and finally the butler's own lodgings in Stepney. Past and present, one unbroken chain. We began at Scotland Yard. The corridor smelled of carbolic disinfectant and old paper. Gas jets hissed overhead. Inspector Gregson met us in a small office piled with ledgers. He looked weary but curious. "You've got your man Holmes." Poole confessed to the theft but swears the murder was impulse. Sir Reginald caught him in the act. Holmes steepled his fingers. "Show me his service record." "Anything prior?" Gregson pulled a thin file. 23 years with the Hargroves, started as footman, rose to butler after old Sir Henry's death. No criminal record, but one notation from 10 years earlier. A brief inquiry into missing silver from the house. Case dropped for lack of proof. Poole had been questioned. He claimed a dishonest maid. "Silver," Holmes murmured. "A small theft then." Emboldened, perhaps, when no punishment followed. Next we took a hansom east to the Hargrove Iron Foundry. The yard rang with hammers and the roar of furnaces. The air tasted of hot iron and coal dust. Mr. Wentworth received us in his office, sleeves rolled, face streaked with soot. "Poole?" he said, surprised. "Came here often enough, errands for Sir Reginald. Last month he brought drawings. Said they were old patent sketches Sir Reginald wished appraised. I recognized them at once, our new valve design. Stolen copies. I confronted him. He denied everything and left." Holmes produced the clay sample again. "You're molding pits. Poole's boots carried this exact mixture. He sold your intellectual property for cash, small sums at first, building to the 5,000 Sir Reginald withdrew to pay a private detective he had hired to trace the leaks." Wentworth nodded grimly. "Reginald suspected embezzlement for months. He told me privately he would prosecute if proof came." Poole must have learned of the detective. "The motive solidifies," Holmes said as we left. "Discovery meant ruin, prison, disgrace. Murder became the only escape." Our final call was Poole's modest lodgings in Stepney, a narrow terrace house smelling of damp brick and boiled cabbage. The landlady, Mrs. Kearney, a stout woman in a stained apron, let us in after Holmes showed his card. "Quiet man," she said. "Kept to himself. Paid on time. But lately, nervous. Burned papers in the great 2 nights before the murder. I saw the flames high." Holmes examined the small sitting room. Rough tweed curtains, worn leather chair, cold grate still holding ash. He sifted the remains with tongs. Fragments of letters emerged, half-burned correspondence from a moneylender demanding repayment, dated 6 months earlier. Another scrap, a receipt for a duplicate key cut at a locksmith in Whitechapel. "Debts," Holmes said softly. "The small thefts began years ago to cover gambling or worse. The silver inquiry was the first warning." He learned caution. Never enough to stop. When Sir Reginald's detective closed in and the 5,000 was to be the final payment for silence, Poole acted. He straightened. All links connect now. The past thefts explain the present crime. The hidden passage, known to him from boyhood service, was the means. The planted carbolic scent and the blood arc were clumsy attempts to shift blame to Miss Voss, whose legacy from Lady Hargrove made her a convenient suspect. The cash in the valise was to fund escape to the continent. I stood by the cold window, feeling the chill of the room despite my coat. 23 years of loyal service, undone by greed. Greed is patient, Watson. It waits until the chain of small sins grows too heavy to bear. Then it snaps. We returned to Baker Street as evening fell. The fire welcomed us with warmth. Holmes sat before it, pipe relit, staring into the flames. The Stradivarius rested untouched on the mantel. Past and present, he said quietly. One unbroken chain. The boy who polished silver became the man who stole patents, then killed to protect the secret. Every link from the old silver inquiry to the dropped duplicate key accounts for the whole. I poured brandy. Its sweet burn steadied me after the day's revelations. Miss Voss is innocent beyond doubt now. Entirely. Tomorrow Lestrade will hear the full account. The chain is forged complete in retrospect. Outside, a distant fog horn sounded on the Thames, low and mournful. Holmes leaned back, eyes half closed. Tell me, dear reader, did the past thefts surprise you, or did you sense the pattern in Poole's long service? The burned papers, the debts, the duplicate key, did you connect them to the old silver case before Holmes laid them out? Watson saw only fragments until the end. How many links from the past did you spot waiting to bind the present? The fire crackled softly. The room smelled of tobacco and warm leather. Past and present, one unbroken chain. Chapter 7. The complete chain. The seventh day brought a crisp autumn wind that swept the last traces of fog from London's streets, leaving the air sharp with coal smoke and the clean bite of coming winter. At Scotland Yard, the interview room felt smaller than usual, lit harshly by gas jets that hissed overhead. Inspector Lestrade had summoned the key parties. Miss Eleanor Voss, released on Holmes' insistence the previous evening. Mr. Charles Wentworth, young Mr. Arthur Langley, Poole the butler, now in custody, wrists bound, and the Hargrove household servants, led by the footman. I sat beside Holmes at the long table, notebook open, pen ready. Lestrade cleared his throat. M.R. Holmes has requested this gathering to explain the case fully. Poole, you are charged with the murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove. Speak when spoken to. Proceed, Holmes. Holmes rose slowly, steepled his fingers beneath his chin, and began in that calm, measured voice that always commanded the room. Every link accounted for. The chain complete. I shall forge it link by link before you, so no doubt remains. He turned first to the physical evidence. The first physical link, the arc of 3 blood drops on the Persian carpet, 7 inches apart, curving left toward the window. The forge, arterial spatter from withdrawal of the blade, cast from the killer's position behind and to the right of the chair. Miss Voss stood opposite the desk when discovered. Her position could not produce this arc without stepping backward through pooling blood, yet no such footprints exist. This excludes her as the assailant. He moved to the next. Second physical link. The boot heel print near the desk leg, size 8, narrow tread, bearing reddish clay mixed with coal dust. The forge. Miss Voss wears ladies' boots size 5, clean of any clay. The clay matches the molding pits of the Hargrove Iron Foundry. Poole, as butler, frequently ran errands there. His boots carried the same mixture. This print belongs to the killer. Holmes gestured toward the table where the duplicate key lay. Third physical link. The duplicate study key, found dropped in the hidden passage behind the bookcase. The forge. The door was never forced. It was locked from inside after the murder, then relocked from the passage side as the killer withdrew. Only someone with long familiarity could possess or have cut such a key. Poole's lodgings yielded the locksmith receipt. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. Now the timeline links. Sir Reginald withdrew £5,000 in cash at 3 o'clock, intended to pay a private detective tracing embezzlement. By 8:30 he was dead, the money gone from the safe. Poole knew his master's movements. He entered by the concealed passage before Miss Voss brought tea, struck the blow, rifled the safe, planted the charred bank draft to carry Miss Voss's carbolic scent, exited the same way, then returned later to discover the body with the household. The timeline fits only him. Next, the witness links. The household confirmed Poole's habit of late-night checks on the study alone. The footman saw him near the bookcase the week prior, ostensibly dusting. Mrs. Grimshaw, Poole's landlady, noted him burning papers days before the crime, debts to a moneylender. Wentworth saw Poole offering stolen patent sketches at the foundry. All witnesses converge on one manual. Holmes' voice grew firmer. The motive links. Small thefts began years ago. Silver missing 10 years past. Case dropped. Debts mounted. Gambling or worse. Sir Reginald discovered the patent thefts. He hired a detective. Confrontation loomed. Prosecution ruin. Murder silenced the threat and provided escape funds. The £5,000 was found in Poole's valise during the chase. Finally, Holmes lifted the small wool fragment. The final connecting link. This scrap of coarse gray wool caught on a nail in the passage, identical to Poole's livery coat. Combined with the drop key, the clay, the timeline, the debts, it binds every preceding link into an unbreakable chain. No other suspect fits all. Miss Voss is innocent. Poole is guilty. A heavy silence followed. Poole sat with head bowed, no longer protesting. Miss Voss wiped tears quietly. Wentworth nodded grim acknowledgement. Langley looked ashamed of his earlier suspicions. Lestrade stood. Poole, you have heard the evidence. Anything to add? The butler raised his eyes, defeated, hollow. I meant only to take the money. He woke. He recognized me. The letter opener was in my hand. It happened so quickly. Holmes regarded him without pity. Impulse born of years of calculation. The chain was forged long before the night. Lestrade motioned to the constables. Take him below. As Poole was led away, Miss Voss approached Holmes. Thank you, sir. I thought my life ended that night. Holmes inclined his head. Truth endures, Miss Voss. It merely waits for observation. We left Scotland Yard together. Outside, the wind carried the distant clang of Big Ben and the rumble of hansoms. The cold bit through my coat, but the warmth of justice prevailed. Back at Baker Street that evening the fire crackled brightly. Holmes sat with pipe lit, the room smelling of tobacco and warm leather. I poured brandy, sweet after the day's tension. The chain is complete, Holmes said softly. Every link accounted for. I raised my glass. To reason. Outside, a foghorn moaned faintly on the Thames. Dear reader, did you follow each link as Holmes forged them? The blood arc, the boot print, the hidden key, the wool fragment. Did you see the complete chain before the final exposition? Watson marveled at the clarity only at the end. How many connections did you hold in your mind? Every link accounted for. The chain complete. Chapter 8. Justice in Chains. The 8th day arrived with a biting wind off the Thames, carrying the sharp tang of river mud and the ever-present haze of coal smoke that never quite left London's air. At Scotland Yard, the cells below felt colder than the streets above. Gas lamps flickered weakly on damp stone walls, casting long shadows. Poole sat on the narrow bench in his holding room, coatless now, wrists still manacled. His face had lost its former composure, hollow-eyed, unshaven. The once immaculate butler reduced to a broken man awaiting transport to the Old Bailey. Inspector Lestrade met us at the entrance, mustache bristling more from habit than triumph. He signed the full confession overnight. Murder in the heat of passion, he claims. Sir Reginald woke, recognized the theft, reached for the letter opener. Poole struck first. The rest matches your chain, Holmes. The money's secured as evidence. Holmes nodded without satisfaction. Let us see the arrest formalized. Justice must be seen to bind as tightly as logic. We descended the stone stairs, boots echoing in the narrow corridor. A constable unlocked the cell door. Poole rose slowly, chains clinking softly. The metallic sound mixed with a distant drip of water from a cracked pipe overhead. Poole, Lestrade began formally. You are charged with the willful murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove on the night of October the 15th, 1892, and with the theft of £5,000 from his safe. You will be taken from here to the Central Criminal Court to stand trial. Poole's voice came low, cracked. I did not intend murder, only the money, to pay what I owed. He woke. He knew. The blade was already in my hand. Holmes stepped forward, calm but unyielding. You prepared the duplicate key weeks in advance. You waited until Sir Reginald withdrew the cash. You entered by the hidden passage you had known since youth. These were not acts of sudden impulse. The chain of premeditation is as clear as the chain of evidence. Poole met Holmes' gaze for the first time. 23 years I served that house. Polished the silver, answered every bell. When the debts grew, when the moneylenders pressed, I took small things at first, then the patents. Sir Reginald trusted me. That trust became my noose. A constable moved to escort him. Poole did not resist. As they passed, he paused before Holmes. "You saw it all," he said quietly. "Every link. I thought the locked door would protect me forever." Holmes regarded him without warmth. "No door is locked against observation, Poole. The ground remembers. The carpet remembers. The dust remembers. Reason finds every hidden way." The party moved upstairs to the charge room. Papers were signed. The valise of banknotes lay open on the table, notes crisp and sequential. Lestrade sealed them in an evidence bag with red wax. Outside, a black Maria waited in the yard, iron-sided, windows barred, horse stamping impatiently on the cobbles. Poole was led out between two constables. A small crowd had gathered, reporters from the Times and the Telegraph, a few curious passers by drawn by whispers of the Belgrave Square murder. Cameras clicked. Flash powder popped with sharp bursts of light and gunpowder scent. Poole kept his head down, chains rattling faintly as he climbed the steps into the van. One reporter called out, "M.R. Holmes, a word for the press." Holmes turned briefly. "The case is closed. The innocent walks free. The guilty stands bound. That is all justice requires." The van doors slammed shut. The driver cracked his whip. Wheels ground over wet stones as the horses pulled away toward Newgate. The sound faded into the general rumble of London traffic. Hansom cabs, omnibuses, the cry of street vendors. Lestrade shook Holmes' hand. "Scotland Yard owes you another debt. Lestrade will buy the drinks next time." Holmes inclined his head. "Keep your men observant, Inspector. That is payment enough." We walked back toward Baker Street. The wind tugged at my coat. I tasted coal smoke with every breath. Gaslights were already lit against the early dusk, their flames hissing in glass globes. At 221B, Mrs. Hudson had kept the fire high. The room smelled of warm tobacco, fresh brewed tea, and the faint leather polish of Holmes' armchair. He sank into it, legs stretched, pipe relit from the coal scuttle. "The criminal bound," he said softly. "Justice served, not with vengeance, but with inevitability." Poole's confession closes the last loose thread. The moneylender's letters explain the desperation. The duplicate key explains the means. The passage explains the impossibility. All accounted for. I poured brandy, sweet, steadying warmth against the day's chill. Miss Voss will rebuild her life now. The children need her. Indeed. Wentworth has already offered her continued employment. The patents are secure. Langley has withdrawn his clumsy courtship. Order returns. Outside, rain began again, soft taps on the window panes. A distant fog horn moaned on the river, low and final. Dear reader, did you feel the weight of those chains as Poole stepped into the van? The clink of iron, the slam of the door. Did you see justice close around him, link by link? Watson watched it all with quiet awe. Did you sense the finality before the Black Maria rolled away? The criminal bound. Justice served. Chapter 9. Links restored. 9 days after the murder, London had settled into a brittle autumn calm. The wind carried the clean scent of frost now, cutting through the usual coal smoke and leaving the cobblestones dry and ringing underfoot. At the Old Bailey the corridors smelled of polished oak, old paper, and the faint carbolic used to scrub the stone floors. I sat in the public gallery beside Holmes, notebook in hand, as the preliminary hearing unfolded before Mr. Justice Hargreaves, no relation to the victim, but the name still caused a murmur among the reporters. Poole stood in the dock, gaunt and neatly dressed in a plain suit provided by the prison. His chains had been removed for the proceeding, but 2 warders flanked him. The prosecutor, a tall barrister with a clipped voice, laid out the indictment: willful murder, grand larceny, forgery of documents related to the stolen patents. The evidence was presented swiftly. The duplicate key, the wolf fragment, the clay-stained boots, the valise of £5,000, all entered as exhibits. Miss Eleanor Voss was called first. She entered the witness box, pale but steady, hands clasped before her gray dress. Miss Voss, the prosecutor began, described the events of the evening of October 15th. She spoke clearly. I carried tea to Sir Reginald at 8:30. The study door was closed but not locked. I turned the handle and entered. He sat at his desk, head forward, blood everywhere. I touched his neck for a pulse, then picked up the letter opener from the floor in shock. I screamed. Mr. Poole and the footman arrived moments later. Did you touch the safe or any papers? Never. I touched only the body and the blade. Cross-examination was brief. Poole's counsel, a weary-looking man, asked only one question. Did Sir Reginald ever speak of dismissing you? No. He trusted me with his children. She stepped down. The court murmured approval. Next came Mr. Wentworth, who confirmed the stolen patent sketches and Poole's attempt to sell them. The locksmith from Whitechapel produced his receipt book. The landlady, Mrs. Kearney, described the burnt papers. Each witness added a thread to the net already woven. Poole declined to testify. His counsel entered a plea of not guilty, but the magistrate committed him for trial at the next sessions. Bail was refused. As the warders led him away, Poole glanced once toward the gallery toward Holmes. No words passed, but the look carried the weight of final acknowledgment. Outside the court, the air felt sharper. Gas lights flared along Newgate Street. Hansoms clattered past. Miss Voss approached us on the steps, accompanied by young Master Thomas and Beatrice, both in mourning black. "M.R. Holmes," she said quietly. The children asked to thank you themselves. Thomas stepped forward solemnly. "You saved Miss Voss. Father would have wanted that." Beatrice held out a small posy of late roses. "For being clever." Holmes accepted the flowers with a rare, gentle smile. "Tell them the cleverness lies in seeing what is already there, children. The truth was never hidden, only overlooked." We parted. The family returned to Belgrave Square. Holmes and I walked toward Baker Street. The evening cold nipped at my ears. I tasted the faint sweetness of frost on every breath. At 221B, the fire burned high. Mrs. Hudson had prepared supper, hot mutton broth, bread still warm from the oven. Holmes sat in his armchair, legs stretched, pipe drawing slowly. "The loose ends tie themselves," he said. Miss Voss cleared in open court. "The legacy from Lady Hargrove passes to her uncontested. Wentworth has confirmed her position remains secure. The patents are restored to the Foundry Ledger. No further claims. Langley has left London for a post in Manchester, wisely removing himself from further embarrassment. The household resumes its rhythm without suspicion hanging over it." I settled opposite him, brandy glass in hand. "And Poole? His trial will be short. The evidence is overwhelming. Confession partial but damning. The sentence predictable. Justice moves slowly, but it moves." Outside, the wind rattled the window panes. A distant fog horn sounded from the river, softer now that winter approached. The room smelled of tobacco, warm leather, and the faint carbolic still clinging to my coat from the court. Holmes leaned back, eyes half closed. Order restored to London's streets. One small household in Belgrave Square returns to quiet days. Children at lessons, tea brought without fear. A governess who can look forward instead of over her shoulder. The chain of injustice is broken. The chain of truth endures. I raised my glass. "To restored links." He touched his pipe stem to the rim in silent agreement. Dear reader, did you feel the quiet relief when Miss Voss stepped from the witness box? The children's small bouquet, the magistrate's gavel falling. Did you see the final threads of suspicion unravel? Watson watched with a physician's quiet satisfaction. How many innocent futures did you glimpse being reclaimed that day? Order restored to London streets. Chapter 10. By the fire at Baker Street. A fortnight had passed since the Old Bailey committed Poole for trial. London had slipped into the quiet grip of early winter. Frost rimed the window panes at 221B Baker Street each morning, and the coal fire burned day and night to keep the chill at bay. The room smelled richly of tobacco from Holmes' pipe, warm leather from the armchairs, and the faint, sweet burn of brandy we kept in the Tantalus. Mrs. Hudson had just cleared away the supper tray, mutton cutlets, potatoes, a pot of strong tea still steaming, when Holmes stretched his long legs toward the hearth and picked up his Stradivarius. He drew the bow across the strings absently, a slow, contemplative air that matched the crackling of the coals. I settled opposite him with my notebook. The last pages of this strange affair nearly filled. It is done, Holmes. The chain forged, the criminal bound, the innocent free. Yet I find myself turning it over still. He set the violin aside and reached for the Persian slipper, filling his pipe with deliberate care. A satisfying close, Watson. Few cases illustrate the method so cleanly. Let's review it once more by the fire as old friends should. He leaned back, steepled his fingers beneath his chin, eyes half closed against the firelight. The chain method as I practice it is simplicity itself. Observe minutely. Record without prejudice. Connect what others see as disparate. One link alone proves nothing. 10 links, forged in logic, bind irrevocably. In this matter, we began with 3 small observations in a locked study. The arc of blood drops curving leftward, the foreign boot print bearing reddish clay, the carbolic scent on a charred bank draft. Each seemed trivial, yet each spoke. The arc excluded Miss Voss's position. The clay pointed eastward to Whitechapel's foundries. The scent tied to the nursery and the governess, yet she denied touching the desk. From those 3 the chain grew. He paused to draw on his pipe. Smoke curled upward in slow spirals. Compare it to the affair of the speckled band. There, too, a locked room baffled Scotland Yard. A whistle in the night. A saucer of milk. A bell rope that was no bell rope. I saw the ventilator, the dummy cord, the bed fixed to the floor, and the chain formed. Venomous snake trained to descend at a signal, strike, and retreat. One misplaced object, the milk, betrayed the method. Here, the misplaced scent betrayed the planting. The ground beneath the boot remembered the foundry clay. The carpet remembered the blood arc. Houses, like people, bear witness if one knows how to question them. He gestured toward the mantel, where the duplicate key still lay as a silent exhibit. Observation defeats deception because deception is lazy. The criminal believes a locked door sufficient. He forgets the hidden passage he himself used for years. He plants a scent to incriminate another. He forgets the open bottle of gargle stands mere feet from his route. He drops a key in haste. He forgets the dust records every footfall. When you eliminate the impossible, Miss Voss could not produce the blood pattern, could not wear the clay-stained boot, could not lock the door from outside. What remains, however improbable, is truth. Cool. Long service, hidden knowledge, mounting debt, stolen patents, discovered theft, desperate murder. Holmes' eyes gleamed with that peculiar light I had come to recognize as intellectual triumph, now tempered by quiet satisfaction. The science of deduction is no mysticism. It is disciplined attention. Train the eye to notice what others glance past. Train the mind to link what others leave unjoined. In the red-headed league, a single boot stained with unique clay demolished an elaborate alibi. In the naval treaty, a single smudge of wax on a carpet corner exposed the thief. Here, a single wool thread caught on a nail in a secret passage bound a 23-year servant to his crime. The method never varies. Only the links change. He fell silent for a time. The fire snapped. Outside, a hansom cab rattled past, wheels crunching faintly on the frosted street. Big Ben told the hour, deep and distant. I closed my notebook. You grow philosophical tonight. Cases of this kind invite reflection, Watson. A man serves faithfully for decades, then betrays everything for greed. A governess stands accused, her life shattered in an instant. A household mourns, children fear. Yet one clear eye, one steady chain of reasoning restores order. That is the true reward, not applause, not payment, but the quiet knowledge that deception, however clever, cannot withstand relentless truth. He rose, crossed to the window, and looked down into Baker Street. Gaslights burned steadily. Fog was creeping back, softening the edges of the world. Until the next chain forges, dear listener, he said softly, almost to the night itself. Some puzzle will arrive, Another locked room, another impossible crime, another shadow in the fog, and we shall begin again. Observe. Good night. Bind. The game continues. He turned back to the fire, pipe in hand, and resumed his seat. I poured us each a final measure of brandy, sweet, warming, final. The Stradivarius rested silent on the mantel. The coals glowed red outside. London slept under frost and gaslight. Until the next chain forges, dear listener, the game continues.